All right, welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker, and you are listening to episode number 63 of the podcast, or watching it on YouTube. It's Monday, September the 4th, Labor Day, so I know a lot of people are probably not working today, which is also why we had the episode a day later than usual. I just didn't feel like doing a whole lot yesterday on Sunday before Labor Day. So Labor Day, I'm not really sure what it is exactly. I think we celebrate hard work by not working. So a little bit of a questionable holiday, but I think everybody's grateful for it. Everybody's enjoying the last legs of summer out there barbecuing, having beers, going to the beach, I hope. If not, then you're having fun with us here on MMA on the Rocks. I'm joined once again by my co-host all the way from New Jersey, sporting a fresh haircut, Jeff the Animal Wilson. Jeff, how are you doing on this Labor Day afternoon, my friend?
I'm great. I'm just wondering where summer went. I feel like I didn't do anything, but that's just me. I'm sure everybody's been beach bumming it this year. But yeah, summer's in its last legs up here in Jersey. But Bill, you have summer year round, so it must be nice.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because this is the first time I've been in Florida for this time of year, so everybody keeps talking about summer's over, and it's still 95 degrees here. Everybody's out on the beach like every other weekend. So not much different here, but if you live up north, I know it's starting to get cooler, and if you're a teacher, it means that you're back to work. At least up north anyway. Here the teachers have been back to work since mid-August, I think. But I'm enjoying Labor Day, Jeff. I'm not doing a whole lot. Just kind of taking it easy. I'm drinking some tequila because I'm trying to be health conscious. Tequila is made from a plant, so that means it is both vegan and gluten-free. And I'm drinking it here on the rocks with an orange slice, so I'm getting my vitamin C as well. So I'm feeling pretty healthy today. I'm drinking Casamigos tequila for the people on YouTube. I'm holding it up. This is one of my favorite tequilas, and I'm not just saying that because they pay me to say that. It really is a nice tequila. It's super drinkable on its own. You could drink this neat. In fact, I often do. I like a little tequila just neat before bed sometimes on the weekend. Helps you fall asleep, relaxes you a little bit. And I just enjoy the taste of, I know a lot of people like to sip on the aged tequilas, so the darker ones, the añejos, as they say. I prefer silver tequila for some reason, which is weird because I'm a whiskey drinker, but Casamigos, which I guess if you translated it, Jeff, it would be like friend's house. Is that remotely accurate?
Yeah, I would say either that or some people might translate it as house friends,
Oh, okay.
which I guess would make you neighbors. I don't know.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I guess there's no direct translation. Let's call it friend's house, because the best tequila is at your friend's house because that's free tequila. So we'll call it that. So I'm drinking that on the rocks. It's pretty tasty on this Labor Day afternoon. Not a whole lot of really exciting things to talk about in the MMA world. I think everybody's still on a hangover from McGregor and Mayweather. There was a card on Saturday during the day here in the States from Holland, and it wasn't a super stacked card or anything, and the main card started like 3:00 in the afternoon. So I'm assuming a lot of people didn't watch it. I was kind of tweeting while I was checking it out on Fight Pass in the middle of the day, fighting off a nap. And it was a pretty solid card, I have to say. I don't want to get too much into it, mostly because I can't pronounce a lot of the names on this card, but it was headlined by Alexander Volkov and Stefan Struve, two gigantic heavyweights, 6'9" and 6'11" respectively, I believe. And Struve is pushing 7 feet tall, so he's the tallest person on the UFC roster. And it was an interesting matchup because we're used to Volkov being taller than people and using his length very effectively, and obviously he's not able to do that against the taller Stefan Struve. It was kind of an awkward fight because Struve kept poking Volkov in the eye, so that was unfortunate. But other than that, I thought this was a really exciting fight. It was a really fast pace for heavyweights, I thought, especially for heavyweights who are this big. I mean, these guys were throwing down. They had some pretty brutal exchanges in there, some awesome striking. I was kind of surprised that Stefan Struve didn't try to take the fight to the ground, because I thought he would have had an advantage there, but he didn't, and he lost by TKO in the third round, towards the end of the third round. So Alexander Volkov definitely bolsters himself a little bit closer to that top 5 in the heavyweight division, which desperately needs some young blood. So, Jeff, I know you caught this main event. What were your thoughts on this fight, and what would you like to see next for either one of these guys?
I did catch this one. Unfortunately, I was a little bit busy Saturday, so I didn't catch the whole card. But I did get to see this, and it was really exciting, really enjoyable. I thought that both guys put on a good show. It was interesting. Unfortunately, there were quite a few eye pokes, and it got to the point where, like, it kind of got to like the boy who cried wolf for me, where at one point I was like, all right, come on, like let's keep fighting. But
What, did you think he was faking getting poked in the eye?
No, but there was at one point where it looked like it was a punch, and then like he for his eye. But I was like, I didn't see any fingers coming out. But I mean, whatever. It was a good fight, very entertaining, and it's always interesting to see how people in the heavyweight division deal with Stefan Struve's overwhelming arm length and height advantage. So very interesting. Good stuff from Volkov. He looked really comfortable in there. It didn't look like Stefan Struve was giving him too much trouble, because Volkov himself is a pretty big dude. So yeah, really entertaining. I enjoyed this one, Bill.
Yeah, it was a fun fight. Like I said, I was kind of surprised to not see Struve even attempt to take this to the ground. I guess he usually only lets the fight go to the ground if he gets taken down, which is more often the case. I guess it's hard to change levels when you're 7 feet tall to try and shoot for a double leg or something. So maybe he doesn't train takedowns very much, and if you train takedowns, that's a long way to fall too. So I don't know. Maybe that's why he didn't try to take it to the ground. But I thought Volkov looked good. The only problem is I don't really know what you do with him now, because he moves himself up the ladder a little bit in that heavyweight division, closer to that top 5, which is pretty much all occupied right now. And I'm not too sure what you do with Stefan Struve either. He said he wants to take some time off. I don't really blame him. A win here would have been, I think, a lot more advantageous for him, being that he has a win over the current heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic. So, he would have been able to maybe call the champ out, since it's still kind of up in the air who he's going to fight. And then, the rest of the division is kind of like, it's old guys and guys that we don't know what to do with at the moment. As far as I know, Francis Ngannou still doesn't have a fight for this coming Saturday, but he's still listed on the card. Some people are saying now Alistair Overeem is going to step up and potentially take the fight. I think that would be interesting for sure. But yeah, a little bit of a confusing division. Any other thoughts on it, or where these?
Yeah, dude, I don't know what you do with the heavyweight division at this point. Volkov, like you said, he moved up a little bit. Francis Ngannou doesn't have an opponent. I mean, they might have to call Anderson Silva for this one.
I wouldn't be surprised. He would probably step up. I mean, John Jones would be a possibility if he were eligible as well. The rest of this card was pretty decent. The co-main event, CR Bahadurzada, I'm going to assume I said that right. If not, we're just going to move on. Gets a TKO victory over Rob Wilkinson. And Wilkinson was super tough in this fight. He got put out of there in the second round. CR Bahadurzada Afghanistan fighter, super tough. He's got a lot of knockout power. He's faced a lot of injuries in the past couple of years, so he hasn't been very active. But, you know, supposedly he's recovered now, and he's looking to make a splash in the UFC again. So we'll see what comes next from him. The best fight on the card, in my opinion, was Marion Renault and Talita Bernardo. So these ladies went at it, and Bernardo was a last-minute replacement. She made her UFC debut to replace Germaine de Randamie, who anonymously pulled out of this fight, and nobody's really talked about it or, you know, mentioned the fact that, one, she gave up her featherweight championship because she was, you know, she said she had an injury, and then she didn't want to fight Cyborg because she was on steroids, and then she said, well, I'm really a bantamweight, so I'm just going to give this belt up. So she gives it up, drops back down to bantamweight, and then drops out of her next fight like a week before the fight. In any case, Marion Renault, almost 40 years old, looked awesome. So Bernardo is supposedly a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and the first round of this fight had some awesome grappling exchanges in it. I really enjoyed it. These ladies were going back and forth, exchanging positions, exchanging submissions. So it was escape after submission after escape after submission, just going back and forth, trying to submit each other. It was really exciting and one of the best grappling exchanges I've seen in a while, definitely in this division, where you have a lot of ladies who like to stand and strike. So Renault coming away with the victory. She TKO'd Bernardo with 6 seconds left in the fight. So it was the kind of fight where, you know, I think you could have given the first round to Bernardo. Renault won the second round. And the third round, Renault was controlling it, but, you know, with these UFC judges, you never know which way the decision is going to go. So she was doing everything in her power to get her out of there. She had her mounted, and she was dropping some crazy elbows, and got her out of there with 6 seconds left. So she almost lasted the distance in her UFC debut, but I would like to see both of these ladies back in there for sure. And then I'll just kind of skim over the rest of this. Maribek Taisumov with a big KO over Felipe Silva in the first round of his fight. That was a pretty impressive KO. And a couple of other finishes on this card. Again, I don't want to get too deep into it just because I can't pronounce a lot of the names on it. And that's pretty much all is worth mentioning. But if you're going to go back, if you didn't check out this card, I'd say definitely go back and watch the main event. It was a great heavyweight fight, awesome pace, and definitely watch the Marion Renault Talita Bernardo fight. That was an awesome fight. Definitely the best fight on the card, in my opinion. So any other thoughts on this Fight Night 115, Jeff, before we move on?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to go back and check out that Marion Renault fight. It sounds awesome. I love the grappling exchanges. You know, we're both jiu-jitsu guys. And, you know, to TKO somebody with 6 seconds left, that's awesome. Like, you know, that's the type of fights we enjoy on this channel.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And she said she kind of wanted to stop, but her corner was yelling at her. She's like, my corner is telling me to keep going, even though I didn't want to. She was exhausted, but you know, she left it all out there and got the finish. So you definitely have to admire that from someone who had a last minute opponent change and who is a very different opponent. She was supposed to fight Germaine de Randamie, who is a Muay Thai fighter. And all of a sudden she's given this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who is making her UFC debut, so she may not have known too much about her. But, you know, so much respect for Marion Renault. So I definitely encourage everybody to go back and watch that fight. Awesome performance all around. Very exciting finish. Something that's not so exciting to me is the upcoming UFC 215 pay-per-view on Saturday the 9th, and it's headlined by Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko for the women's bantamweight championship. Oh wait, I forgot the headliner is actually billed as Mighty Mouse and some guy. I can't, you know, and there's so many people I see on Twitter and Facebook and other places saying, like, do you think Demetrious Johnson is the greatest of all time if he breaks the record? And I don't even see like anything close to an argument for that. And it's not because he's in a smaller weight class. It's because, you have to consider strength of schedule with these things. And I feel a little bit like a broken record. I know you and I have been over this quite a few times, Jeff, but it's impressive that he's won this many fights in a row at this level, but a lot of the fights he's won, he's just taking guys into deep water who had no business being in the 125-pound division in the first place. And I think Ray Borg may be no different. Here's a guy who has missed weight twice in this division. Not really like a world beater. I don't think he's even ranked as the number one contender. That still has to be either Benavidez or Cejudo. So I don't really know how to get excited for this fight, and I don't know how to make. I don't know why people keep trying to make this argument that he's the greatest fighter of all time. And even he released a statement saying that Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre were great champions, but I'm the greatest person to ever step in this octagon. And I just feel like Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre are two of the greatest because they never had to say anything like that. Their performances speak for themselves. They both beat former champions, and bigger name guys. If you ask somebody who knows nothing about UFC, who their favorite fighters are, George St. Pierre will probably come up for older generations. Anderson Silva, you might get a John Jones, you might get a, I don't know, Brock Lesnar, I don't know, Conor McGregor, but nobody knows who Mighty Mouse is. And, that has to speak to your legacy as much as the amount of victories you have, in my opinion. So what are your thoughts on the main and co-main for this pay-per-view coming up, Jeff?
Bill, I think that they should swap positions. I would much rather see Nunez versus Shevchenko 2 as the main event. Just Demetrious Johnson versus Ray Borg is not doing it for me. And I feel bad saying that because, Bill, I've defended Demetrious Johnson so much on this podcast, but I just feel like I feel like we have a Rocky 3 situation here. Remember Rocky 3 where Mick gives Rocky these safe fights, these winnable and then Clubber Lang comes out of nowhere and knocks him out in like the third round. So I feel like we have that on our hands here. I feel like Johnson. He's taken a bunch of safe fights. Like for example, his last fight, Wilson Hayes. I didn't even know who that was until they said he got a title shot.
Yeah.
So that's
it's unfortunate. Wilson Hayes, a tough guy, but he was nowhere near being deserving of a title shot. And I don't think Ray Borg would be either if there were actual contenders in this division. I think that's part of the problem. If you go over Mighty Mouse's resume, I'd say probably his most impressive victories were over John Dodson, maybe Joseph Benavidez. I think Henry Cejudo only had like 4 fights when he fought him or something like that. So it's hard for me to see this argument. And before Wilson Hayes, they had to have a reality show just to find a contender for this guy because there's nobody in this division. So the guy who comes off the reality show, who's really should be a bantamweight, and Tim Elliott, gave him a pretty tough test. But Tim Elliott's a guy who wasn't even in the UFC. He had to go through a tournament to get back in, and then they give him a title shot just because there's nobody else. Whereas if you look at guys like GSP and Anderson Silva and the people that they had beaten during their title defense winning streaks, it's just so much more impressive. In any case, I would agree with you about switching the main event for Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko, but I think there's two reasons that the UFC did it this way. One is that Amanda Nunes pulled out of the last fight very last minute, and she was billed as the headliner then, so the UFC got burned there. So I don't think they would put her in that spot in her very next fight because they would be concerned about that. And the other reason, I think, I brought up this theory a couple of weeks ago. I think the UFC is going to use the numbers from this pay-per-view to justify cutting the flyweight division because, here you have a little bit of lull in the action after McGregor and Mayweather. This is the very next pay-per-view. So people just shelled out $100 to watch Conor McGregor fight. So how many people are going to pay $60 for this card? My guess is not very many. I would think that this card does well under 200,000 buys, and I think that's even being generous. I'd say it might drop under 100,000, which UFC probably hasn't done that kind of number since like UFC 30 or something like that. And you don't really have any other star power on this card. I mean, you got Amanda Nunes, who, her claim to fame is knocking out washed up Ronda Rousey pretty much that didn't look like Magny. This is a great fight for the hardcore fans, as well as Gilbert Melendez and Jeremy Stevens. And then, you got flyweights, Henry Cejudo and Wilson Hayes. Who cares, really, what happens there? So, I don't know. Out of those fights I mentioned, Jeff, which ones tickle your fancy the most?
I'm liking Neil Magny versus Rafael Dos Anjos. That one looks really good. And Stevens versus Melendez looks like it's going to be a really good scrap. And Cejudo versus Hayes, I mean, they have both challenged, what's his name, Demetrious Johnson. They've both lost to him. But I feel like they're both pretty solid. Cejudo especially. I'd like to see him a little bit more just because when he did challenge Demetrious Johnson, like you said, I think he'd only had 10 pro fights, only like 4 of them in the UFC. But this dude's good, man. He's an Olympic wrestler, so I want to see more of him. But, yeah, other than that, this card's not doing it for me.
Yeah. You have Sarah McMahon's on there, who is facing a undefeated Ketlin Vieira, who I'm not really sure who she is. And then Ashley Evans Smith also. So Ashley Evans Smith, Sarah McMahon, two of the best wrestlers probably as far as women's MMA goes, in my opinion. I'm interested in the Dos Anjos Magny fight. That's an interesting matchup. I'm interested in seeing Ngannou fight somebody, I guess. I can't. If I was doing marketing for this fight, I would be like, well, fuck, man, what's my budget? Like, what do I got to do to sell this? If it was my job on the line to get 200,000 pay-per-view buys, I would be working on my resume right now because I don't think that's really a doable task. And then you got Alir Latifi on there against Tyson Pedro. That that could be an exciting fight. Latifi, I think, hasn't been back in there since that brutal KO loss to Ryan Bader. Man, I was so excited for the Nunes-Shevchenko fight the first time around. Not the first time they fought, but first time the rematch was announced. And, we got pretty far in depth on that one, but when it didn't culminate, that kind of took a lot of the wind out of the sails. I was excited to see it at that time. Maybe when the night comes around, I'll change my mind. But yeah, I would have a hard time getting out of bed for this one, and that's unfortunate. I do like Mighty Mouse. as a fighter. I think he's very talented. I think he's an awesome fighter. He's got a unique set of skills, but I just have very little patience for this calling him the greatest of all time ridiculousness that's been going on, because just because he hasn't fought anybody, you know. And what would change my mind is if after this fight he goes up and he challenges a bantamweight, you know, he challenges Cody Garbrandt or whoever has the bantamweight belt, and he beats them handily. You know, then we could start talking about, you know, if he's in a discussion for the best of all time, because, you know, a lot of the others, like Anderson Silva, fought up at 205. He didn't care about, you know, defending his belt a consecutive amount of times or anything like that. You know, he just took the fights that were there, and he took the exciting fights. So John Jones, if he could stay off of steroids, would probably move up a weight class in 10 years or whenever it is that he's going to come back from his potential USADA suspension, which, you know, we're still not too clear on how that's going to go down. So UFC 215, September 9th. Let me know if we got this wrong. Like, if you're excited for this one, you know, let us know why. Reach out on social media. You can get Jeff at @animal_Wilson on Twitter. And, of course, you can find me at MMA on the Rocks, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. So, anyway, I'm enjoying my tequila here. Jeff, you been sipping on anything interesting as of late?
I have not, other than the usual, you know, Yingling, Steel Reserve. Nothing that has stood out. But I'm going to try and go out for this UFC 215 fight. So even if I don't enjoy the car, I'll at least enjoy the experience by trying some new craft.
There you go. Yeah. I feel like I have an obligation to the listeners of this show to try and drink different things. I don't want to always talk about, you know, Jim Beam, and which, you know, I'm sure a lot of you know by now, if you're regular listeners, that I always have a big jug of Jim Beam handy. It's like that'll be my go-to. You can't beat it. I think it's definitely the best value for your money. I think it's something not even on sale. I think it's like $24 for like the big jug handle of Jim Beam, and you know, I think it's tasty. I enjoy it, just like I'm enjoying this Friend's House tequila right now. All right. Any other news or anything? Are we passing anything else up? After the Mighty Mouse fight is another fight night headlined by Luke Rockhold and David Branch. We kind of touched on that one last week a little bit. I don't know of any other news, man. Like a lot of stuff has been, you know, still the trickle down effect of the Conor McGregor fight and, you know, John Jones steroids. There hasn't been a whole lot of other headlines aside from that. Anything else you want to bring up, Jeff? We're going to make this a short one.
I got nothing off the top of my head.
All right. Well, as always, please send us your drink recommendations if you guys are drinking anything interesting out there, especially in the realm of bourbon and whiskey and craft beer. We always love to hear them, so reach out to us on social media. At @animal_Wilson is Jeff, and at MMA on the Rocks is where you can find me. And if you have any other suggestions for the show, things you'd like to hear differently, let us know. And also, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening. That does help us out a lot. So go ahead and take the couple of minutes to leave an honest review, and we would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, happy Labor Day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers, everybody. Goodbye.